I had always considered myself a punctual person. As a liaison officer on the Galactico Accord, coordinating human-alien relations across multiple star systems, being late was nearly unforgivable. Yet, that morning, a series of minor mishaps, a malfunctioning gravlift, a misrouted courier droid, and a spilled cup of nutrient fluid conspired to make me late for a meeting that would forever change my understanding of interstellar diplomacy and humanity itself. By the time I arrived at Hall 17 of the Andari Council Chambers, I was breathless, my uniform slightly wrinkled, and my mind racing with apologies and excuses. I expected tension, maybe irritation from my superiors. What I did not expect was the scene that greeted me when I opened the door. The room was vast, circular, and bathed in soft luminescent panels embedded in the walls. Dozens of figures were seated in concentric rings, all facing the center. My first thought, absurd though it seemed, was that the assembly looked more like a courtroom than a diplomatic chamber. Then my eyes fell on the occupants, the widows of the Andari War, alien women who had lost their mates in the recent interstellar conflicts that had ravaged the Andari sector. Their faces were marked by grief, yes, but also something far more powerful: resolve, strength, and a quiet, simmering anger. Their forms were diverse, some tall, others slight, some covered in biocrystalline armor, others with skin that shimmered in hues of violet and silver, but all carried an aura of authority that silenced the room. I froze, unsure whether I should step in or retreat. My late arrival had made me an intruder in a gathering that seemed more sacred than bureaucratic. Then the leader spoke. "You are late, human," said Zyra, the widow representing the Eastern Cluster. Her voice was calm, but edged with steel. "Yet perhaps your tardiness is fortunate. You shall witness what most dare not enter." I swallowed, stepping into the circle. The room fell into near-complete silence. Dozens of alien widows turned their gaze toward me, and for the first time, I understood the weight of their presence. They were not simply grieving women. They were living testaments to the cost of war, survivors who had endured loss, betrayal, and the immense pressure of rebuilding their societies alone. I apologize for being late," I stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude." Zyra tilted her head, her amber eyes glinting. "Intrusion is irrelevant. The question is, what will you do now that you are here? Will you observe with respect, or will you fail as those before you did?" I nodded, unsure how to respond. Observation was all I had trained for, but even then, the gravity of their collective presence pressed down on me. The meeting began. Each widow spoke in turn, recounting not just the deaths of their mates, but the systemic failures that had led to the war, the betrayals within the political hierarchy, and the ongoing struggles to maintain security and stability. Their words were sharp, incisive, and emotionally raw. I listened, taking notes, trying to absorb the breadth of knowledge and the depth of emotion conveyed in their speeches. What struck me most was their unity. Despite the personal nature of their losses, there was no chaos in the room, only a disciplined, collective force of purpose. Each widow's voice strengthened the next, creating a tapestry of strategy, critique, and warning. It became clear that these women were not just mourning, they were planning. They had become the stewards of their people's survival, balancing grief with tactical acumen and political foresight. I was called upon to provide the human perspective. My hands trembled slightly as I approached the center of the circle. "Human liaison," Zyra said, "tell us what your species has learned from observing our losses and victories. What will you offer that is of value to us?" I took a deep breath. We humans, we have endured wars, disasters, and the collapse of governments. We have made mistakes, horrific ones, but we also learn from them. We survive. We adapt. And while we cannot undo what has been lost here, we can offer knowledge, technology, and an allyship built on transparency and persistence. There was a moment of silence. Then one of the widows, a woman with crystalline arms, spoke. Persistence is useful, yet your species often mistakes noise for wisdom. How can we trust that you will act without ego or hidden agendas? I nodded, expecting skepticism. By being accountable, by accepting the consequences of our mistakes, by standing beside you, not above you. Another widow, smaller, almost delicate in appearance, leaned forward. Few humans have understood that before. Most are intimidated or attempt to dominate. You speak with honesty. That is why you are still here. Weeks passed, and I became a fixture in the circle of widows. I attended strategy meetings, assisted in interstellar coordination, and helped optimize communication systems between Andari outposts and human fleets. I learned more in those weeks than in years of conventional diplomatic service. The widows were formidable teachers. They demanded precision, clarity, and foresight. Any misstep was corrected immediately, not with cruelty, but with relentless expectation. They did not allow mistakes to fester. They eliminated them, reshaped them, and made the lessons permanent. And through it all, I began to understand something profound. These widows had transcended grief. They were living proof that resilience and intellect, when combined with purpose, could rebuild worlds. The final test came unexpectedly. Intelligence reports indicated that a rogue faction of mercenaries intended to assassinate Zyra during a public tribunal on Orvith Prime. The plan was sophisticated, their infiltration nearly flawless. The widows called an emergency session. "You will assist," Zyra said, turning to me. "If this plan succeeds, the political balance of the sector collapses. If it fails, many lives, including yours, may be at risk." I swallowed. "I understand. I'll do my part." The operation was meticulous. We analyzed every access point, every security loop, every potential threat vector. I worked on enhancing surveillance systems and coordinating human fleet movements, while the widows orchestrated the defense of the tribunal with their unmatched tactical foresight. When the mercenaries struck, their surprise was complete. The widows anticipated every move, redirected forces, and neutralized threats with precision. I contributed where I could, maintaining communication links and stabilizing defensive grids. By the end, not a single life was lost, the tribunal proceeded safely, and the rogue faction was dismantled. Zyra approached me afterward, her expression solemn. "You did well. You did not falter. You contributed without ego. Few outsiders would have survived this test." I exhaled, finally feeling relief. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." She nodded. "Perhaps. But your presence here, your willingness to learn, and your honesty allowed us to trust you. That is rare. That is why you stayed when most would have fled or failed." Months turned into years. I continued to serve alongside the widows, observing, learning, and occasionally contributing human ingenuity to their strategies. The group's influence expanded, becoming a stabilizing force across multiple star systems. Political factions learned to respect their council, and entire colonies benefited from their leadership. I realized that my late arrival, the seemingly trivial act that had placed me among these widows, had become a turning point. I was no longer merely a liaison officer. I had become a bridge between species, a human whose honesty and perseverance allowed me to witness and contribute to interstellar history. The widows never softened completely. Their grief was never trivialized, and their authority remained absolute. Yet they allowed me to exist within their ranks, not as a subordinate, but as a respected participant. I understood then that the galaxy's strength did not lie solely in fleets, weapons, or diplomacy. It lay in resilience, intelligence, and the ability to rise from loss with purpose. On my last day among them before returning to human space, Zyra spoke quietly as we observed a holographic projection of the Andari sector. "You stayed," she said. "You observed. You contributed. You survived where others would have failed. That is why you were allowed to witness the power of the widows." I can't say I expected this," I admitted. "I just walked in late and then saw you all. I didn't know what to do." "And yet you remained," she said, her amber eyes glinting. "That is what mattered. Intention outweighs circumstance. Courage, honesty, and perseverance are measured not in absence of fear, but in the act of standing firm despite it. You did that." I smiled, humbled. I learned more than I ever imagined I could. "And so," she said, "the widows remain, but you, human, have changed. Do not forget what you saw here. Let it guide your people. Let it remind them that resilience, unity, and wisdom are stronger than fear or loss." I nodded, realizing that I had been given a rare privilege to witness not just the power of the widows, but the profound truth of what it meant to endure, to rise, and to act with integrity when the world, or galaxy, tests you the most. I walked in late. I saw the dozens of alien widows. And I stayed. Because I stayed, I learned that true strength is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to confront it, to contribute, and to grow in the shadow of loss. That lesson would guide me for the rest of my life, and perhaps if I shared it wisely, it could guide humanity itself.